Well, that's nice. Don't we all feel a little calmer after that? That music came to us courtesy of Mindstream, who is one of our partners. With NAMI West Side for this month-long series of events we've been holding to celebrate Mental Health Awareness Month. Today, we are celebrating Mental Health Action Day, and we have a really wonderful conversation coming up that is going to be moderated by the fabulous Rose Bloomfield. As a public speaking coach and workshop leader, Rose helps clients bring transformative events and stories to life in order to make a more positive impact in the world. Rose also hosts the podcast Path and Purpose, featuring conversations with a wide range of tech and thought leaders about how to create meaning in the modern world where community, technology, and ancient wisdom converge. We could not have asked for a better moderator for this panel on the future of work, and it gives me great pleasure now to introduce my friend, Rose.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with all of you and our speakers today. And thank you, NAMI Westside LA, for organizing this genuinely important event. Today, we are here to further the conversation on the future of work from a mental health standpoint, and really ask the question, why is caring for our own and our team's mental and emotional well-being so vital as we make this transition from the post-COVID pandemic world into the future of work? Also, what lessons or habits have we learned in this time that we want to use going forward that have made life better? So thank you for joining us today. And I want to ask each of you, whether that's just a rhetorical question for you to consider or use the chat, why are you here? What role does mental health play in your life? And how has it been this last year? What are you hoping to take away from this conversation yourself? And I know I'm here because I have been working remotely for 4 years. I know the pain of feeling isolated, anxious, at times depressed, disconnected. And I've also come to find the opportunities and the challenges of remote and hybrid work that I also know our incredible speakers are going to be illuminating for us in this conversation in the next 30 to 45 minutes. So do consider your questions as you start to listen to the stories we'll be hearing. We have Sherri Schachter from Google. We have David Roeder from Snap Inc. I'm gonna say Snack Inc. Snap Inc. And Dr. Karen Wilson, who is a local neuropsychologist here based in LA. So Sherri is joining us from New Jersey, and she's been working in the technology-enabled learning field for more than 20 years. She's led learning teams in different capacities for the last 6 years at Google, and before that was in charge of digital learning at McKinsey. She knows her stuff. And she's needed to be in the world of tech and work for years. So today she really wants to share what's top of mind for teams considering returning to the office post-pandemic. David, who's joining us from NYC at Snap, has been working in advertising for more than 20 years. And he's currently the head of global solutions at Snap, prior to which he was working at the Players Tribune and led teams at Twitter and ESPN. So now he's also on the board of directors for a nonprofit called Active Minds, which is leading mental health nonprofit organization. And our third speaker here, our expert in neuropsychology, Dr. Karen Wilson. Karen, she specializes particularly in adolescents struggling with some neurodevelopmental or mental health issues, and she knows the services to provide. So we really have an incredible, rich platform of speakers that are going to share their stories. And I want to kick this off with asking Sherri, would you please share a little bit with us about why you're here and what your experience with mental health in this period of time has been like? What have you learned for yourself?
Sure. Well, for me personally, I struggled really at the beginning of COVID with a fair amount of anxiety and depression that kind of built up. At the very beginning of the COVID situation, it just felt like it was endless and we were going to be stuck at home, not able to see anyone for the longest time. And a colleague of mine mentioned a benefit that we have at Google where you can do therapy via video conference. And because she mentioned that to me, I realized that I recognized that I needed help, and I realized I could go get help pretty quickly and painlessly. And I'm really glad I did. I wouldn't have done it if she hadn't mentioned it. And it really helped me get through a difficult time. So that's why I decided to come and join you guys here today, is just to share that message. We all have to talk about mental health more openly and be ready and willing to share your experiences and get help.
Thank you. Thanks, Sherri. And David, same question. What's your experience this last period of time and maybe a learning about mental health in your world, your life?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll go back even a little bit before this. I think, to really answer your question, why am I here? I mean, I think it's because we are finally at a point in time now where we're becoming comfortable talking about our mental health. And I for my entire life, child, adult life, I've just sort of stayed away from it. I've stayed away from thinking about it. I've stayed away from addressing it. And a few years ago, I finally had an opportunity to talk to somebody, and I was diagnosed with OCD and anxiety, and stuff I knew my whole life, my whole child life and adult life, but I never took the time to address it. And I've come to realize, especially over the past year and a half, that the value in talking about it, the value in sort of opening up and addressing the fact that it's perfectly okay to not be okay. And so that's why I'm here. And you're all creating the space, and hopefully there's a group of folks that are watching us. And I just think that's really important right now at this time, that we're open, that we're honest, and that we create a world where it is okay to have these conversations and we normalize it.
Yes, couldn't agree more. Karen, from your standpoint, I know we had a pre-conversation, the 4-5 of us with the organizers. We got to hear a little bit about what you see, especially from the adolescent standpoint and some of the ripple down effects from parents. Why are you here today? And what do you want to add to the message of it's okay to not be okay? There is help to be sought. You're not alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, all the things that you just said, I've over the last year and prior to the pandemic, I'd been working with families where kids were struggling, adolescents were struggling with not only learning challenges, but also mental health challenges, anxiety and depression, self-concept issues. And I'd always done that work. And when the pandemic hit, it seemed like there was an exacerbation of those issues for a lot of the families that I was working with. And it became not only an issue for the children that I would normally see in my office, but also for their parents. And then I saw a lot of things coming up with the colleagues that I was working with who had transitioned to remote learning, and it kind of manifested as stress. And there's been a lot of work on stress and surveys on stress over the past year. And I think for me, top of mind that keeps coming back as we were talking about preparing for this session today was a statement that Janet Yellen made that really speaks to the experience of so many parents that I've worked with and so many other professionals who serve children and adolescents and their families. And what Janet Yellen said was that our policy making hasn't accounted for the fact that people's work lives and their personal lives are inextricably linked. And I think that the pandemic has made that incredibly clear, because it's been a year of not only stress related to uncertainty, but it's been exacerbated by a lot of grief and a lot of trauma and a lot of isolation that has led to anxiety and stress and sadness. And that hasn't gone away just because things are starting to open up. And so I think in order to kind of get ahead of the secondary crisis, which would be in the mental health realm, we really need to start having these conversations and prepare for the transition back to quote unquote normal life.
Thank you. Excellent. And I have a feeling that Sherri and David might have something to add to this as well right there. But I know I just heard on NPR, I don't know if you all have, something about 750,000 deaths are associated with overwork and burnout from the last year. It's been an enormous stressor, as you're saying, the real life experience of moving through the pandemic, grief and loss, and then needing to do it in the container of our homes, or between places where you don't have some of the pressure release of the water cooler talk, so to speak. And so how do we create those informal spaces to connect? And I want to ask perhaps David, Sherri, and Karen, if you have any experience here around how are you supporting your teams, having those pressure releases? How are you taking your personal learnings and providing it as a leader in your companies so that this does further the mental health conversation?
I don't want to step on Dave, but I literally just wrote these words. We're doing these like user guide to myself, like trying to describe sort of how I work and what's important to me. And I literally just wrote that I like small talk, that every conversation I start, I always start with, how are you? At least how's the weather? Because I actually have been working from home for a really long time. Like you, Rose, you have 4 years that you've been doing this. And I don't get that water cooler conversation. That's that opening, that like, just want to chat. That's my time to connect with people on a human level. And what I wrote in my instructions were, if you need to cut to the chase, that's okay too. You can just tell me that and my feelings won't be hurt. But you give me the opportunity, and I always start with that as just a way to get to know people and again, to release. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, the alarming stat as I was prepping that I saw over the weekend was something like 84% of people say that they're just too ashamed to talk about mental health with their colleagues, and it's as high as 60% with their families and friends. And so, that's where my head starts to go. Like, if we're gonna break down these barriers, how do we make it okay to have these conversations at work? How do we bring, there was an article that I loved a couple of weeks ago, and it was about, don't underestimate the power of kindness at work. How do you bring kindness into the workplace? How do you do things like, set aside time in your weekly meeting to celebrate kind acts and celebrate people that are exhibiting kindness? That's the kind of stuff that I think starts to drive empathy and drive the types of conversations that we need to have. So it's just super focused on stuff like that. We also, at work, we do something where, we call it council, where we give everyone an opportunity to come together and sit and talk about topics that maybe aren't necessarily in the day-to-day business. And it just creates an opportunity for us to get to know one another better and have some really important conversations, create those maybe water cooler moments that were happening in person. And so I think, world, again, where 84% of us don't want to talk about this, maybe we need to do a little bit extra work to bring kindness and empathy into the workplace, and create environments where it's okay to have these conversations. It's okay to show maybe that you're a bit vulnerable. I think that's a power of strength.
Yeah, I love statistics too. And what's really interesting about that statistic, David, is that studies have also shown that 84% of adults report having at least one emotion associated with stress or mental health issues. So that can be anxiety, it can be sadness, can be anger. And so that's most people. And at least half are saying that they feel uneasy about this return to normal life. And that's whether or not they're vaccinated. And so I think we have to kind of validate those concerns, validate that experience, normalize it is kind of the first step in realizing that this is how people are feeling, and to normalize that and not have people feel ashamed of still being anxious about returning to work. I think that's a good first step. And then providing an environment that encourages dialogue about that. You know, we've had kind of Zoom meetings and meetups with allied professionals who work in the space that I do, where people can share what it is that they're experiencing. And that sharing, when you don't have a water cooler, can be a buffer against stress. So providing those opportunities are critical to addressing some of the challenges and the mental health challenges that people are experiencing.
This is fantastic. Thank you, each of you. As a little reiteration, some of these key takeaways of what I'm hearing is bringing back small talk, asking, how are you? Making that time for some of the, what seems like unproductive, inefficient talk. And it really does depend on the culture you come from. On the West Coast, that we really are hyper-focused on productivity and outcomes. If you're in France, it would be rude if you jumped in right away to outcome. Or if you went to the Middle East, it would be rude if you hadn't had tea or eaten and talked about other things before you jumped in. And this is about relationship building. This is about building trust. And there was a study that came out of Google, actually, that I recall, around the power of psychological safety as the #1 driver of collaboration and creativity and innovation. We have to feel safe. And we can't feel safe if we can't be our whole selves. So a quick interjection of a personal story of where this happened in my life about 2 years ago is I had a breakdown in France. I was going through essentially a divorce. I needed to move out of my apartment. Everything in my life was changing, except I was continuing to work. And my team, in our end of the year conversation where we had champagne and we were celebrating, you know, our achievements from the year, one of the founders of the company asked me to share with the team my learnings of moving through stress. How was I able to move through the stress of my personal changes and continue to show up as well as I did for my clients and with the company? And so they put me both on the hotspot, but acknowledged and reinforced, created an environment where we were embracing difficulty, internal difficulty. So I want to ask as well, and yes, leading by example, Karen, what you're talking about of creating that environment, Dave mentioned counsel, right? These are practices within organizations where you do listen, and the power of listening is used for healing. So do you have an aha moment, any one of you, where you really either saw a missed opportunity and maybe negative effects of where shame or not having an environment where difficulty was supported or encouraged to be shared, or an aha experience or a surprising experience where someone did speak up, or you had a beautiful moment of noticing the power of vulnerability at work? Or anything else that comes to mind if that doesn't trigger, you know, we have a few things on the table right now. Okay, so coming back then to, we've talked a little bit about some of the personal difficulties each of you see or face in your positions. What are some of your personal positive coping strategies that you have learned this year? Something that you do, whether that's at work or after work or before work, that helps you do your best in work, because that is the point of our conversation right now.
I'll be happy to start. I would first acknowledge that I probably don't do any of these things as often as I should. So I think I'd like to start there, because I think there are definitely some things that we can do in terms of self-care. And I know that self-care has probably been overused over the past year, but I think acknowledging the fact that self-care isn't massages and bubble baths, and it's not a luxury, it's not selfish, it's not self-indulgent, and that it's necessary for well-being and for mental health. And so when I'm talking about self-care, I'm talking about making sure you're getting adequate sleep. So I wear my Fitbit at night, and I know how much sleep I need to get in order to feel good the next day. So getting adequate sleep is an essential self-care strategy. And so that's one of the things that I do, is I have to make sure that I'm getting enough sleep. And I can tell you that during the pandemic, has not always been the case. Some days it's great, some days it's not, but being consistent and really prioritizing sleep is a good thing that I find helpful in doing. And trying to get physical activity wherever I can, because, and again, this is something that I don't do nearly as often as I should, but I know that it's essential to mental health. It actually elevates your mood when you are outdoors and you're getting exercise. And we know that being sedentary, like we've been over the past year, can actually have long-term, not only physical, but mental health-ish complications, lead to those complications. And so those are two things that I try to do as often as I can, or at least tell people that they should do in order to help with mental health.
Karen, I get out every morning. Every morning I either walk or run. Right now I try to run. I think I call it jogging, though it's not really like running, my pace, every other day, so that I have like a schedule, and then I know when I'm going to be running. And my trick is I put on my exercise clothes the moment I get out of bed, because then I feel stupid if I take a shower and I haven't actually, gotten sweaty. It's like my little trick to make sure I actually get outside. And to me, it's not just the exercise, but it's actually physically being outside and being in the fresh air. And I try to do it rain, snow, sleet. Sometimes I don't do it when the weather's really bad, but I try to do it every day.
It's a great strategy.
Plus one on the sleep. There's such a difference between, me not getting enough sleep and getting sleep, and everything. When I get enough sleep, I can run better, I can meditate more, I eat healthier, and then I don't sleep. And by the way, I'm not doing a great job sleeping, just to be clear. This is not going well. It's not easy. But I was going to just double click on the meditation one, because I know it's it's buzzwordy, and I know a lot of people are trying it and doing it. And it for me, it didn't take for a little bit of time. And, I had someone in my ear that was, oh, thanks, Tim. I had someone in my ear that was just, nonstop, keep at it, stay with it. And, week like 4, I started to notice the difference. I started to notice the effects, and I'm glad I stuck with it. And so anytime I talk to people now about any type of meditation, for me, it's transcendental meditation, but any type of meditation, I just tell people to stick with it, because when it does start to really work, you start to see the impact in it. And it's great. Managing your calendar, I put blocks in the day. I make sure that I stick to them, because if not, it won't happen. None of it'll happen if not. And it's, I'm looking after this myself, and without it, there's no way any of this is going to work and any of this is going to happen. And so I find like I've got to turn the notifications off on my phone. I've got to make sure I put breaks in my day, and I've got to stay with it. And there's no in between. If I miss one of these things, everything falls apart and I start sleeping less. And so I don't know, for me, it's all the above. And I'll say the last thing is, for me personally, talking to somebody else is huge. I mentioned therapy before, but I love talking about, what it feels like to go talk to a great therapist and how impactful that is. And, I remember the days of walking into the office and, high-fiving my colleagues, and God, that was a great SoulCycle ride or a great Peloton ride. But we never come in and go, I just had a great therapy session. But maybe we should. Maybe we should talk about it. Maybe we should brag about it. Maybe it'll remove, again, some of that stigma, because it's just as important as looking after your physical health.
And I think what's so important here to hear these stories from each of you as leaders of teams, people who are really senior in your field, is you are setting an example, especially for the more junior colleagues or people who are entering the workforce, more concerned about being perceived as credible or safe as a bet growing in their career. So by you speaking up, I know that's having an impact, and you can be that first high fiver. And I want to answer, we have someone's question, Julian L. wanted to ask, for those who are doing really long days at home during COVID, where you're not interacting with colleagues in person, maybe you're living on your own. I know a lot of people in Paris and around cities around the world, there's a great deal of isolation that happened this year. And I want to ask, do you have any suggestions? I think the sleep is amazing. I think speaking to a therapist is amazing and relevant here. I know I had some pretty creative solutions for that during the pandemic that I can share, but I want to ask you first, what would you say to those people who are doing long stretches of time at their computer, who are starting to feel the negative effects?
I think there are a number of things you can do. I think all the things that we've mentioned that all of us are doing, and taking a break from that screen, absolutely, to get exercise, to engage in meditation or mindfulness exercise, all of those things break up the day. And again, they enhance your mood, they help with focus, and they actually decrease anxiety and stress levels. So those are absolutely some things that you can do. And then finding opportunities to connect with others, even if it's taking a break from the screen, to text if you can't, or video conference with a loved one, a friend that you haven't seen in a while, to take a walk around the block and maybe see people even from a distance and engage with them. Sometimes then some of the best conversations I have are at the grocery store with the person that I see over and over and over again. It's just that human contact and that human connection that can contribute to a good mood. So if you can take a break, go to Ralph's or the grocery store and pick up one of the items, treat yourself, and have a conversation with someone, in line or at the cashier with the cashier, then that is, again, that human connection or human contact. Yes, we've been on Zoom, but we can still video conference with family, with friends, with loved ones. And that is another way to connect and maintain that connection, which again is helpful for our mental health.
Karen, Dr. Wilson, sorry. I don't think I realized how much of a pack animal I was until the human contact was cut off for me. And then then it just was so quick to go, hold on, I can't hug my friends. I can't I have to stay 6 feet apart. I just didn't realize how much I needed that human connection. And I think we all just have to get creative to keep feeding that need. Because otherwise it's really easy to go stir crazy for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if I have much to add. I know during the day when it gets to that 6th hour of looking at the video screen, when I get the sort of the snap or the text and someone says, hey, let's just have a phone call, that's like the most one. I could take a walk around the block and maybe go outside for a second, and you have to break up. And so I've realized how important those breaks are during the day. I can still talk to my colleagues. I can talk to my friends. I love, Dr. Wilson, the idea of going and finding friends and having those conversations. But the more you can turn off the camera for just a little bit during the day, I think the better we're all going to feel.
Okay, so I want to add on and just sort of synthesize something that I hear from each of you that's so important, and that is the incorporation of the body and the physical in our well-being. So one of the episodes that I did for Path and Purpose, this podcast, was with my friend who works at Google. And I asked him, when he's working remotely, what is one potential risk of our increasingly technological future? And he said, forgetting the body. And it's very true, right? We have so many things that we can be sidetracked by and brought into, that we can forget to use the restroom, to blink, to move our shoulders, to relax our jaw, to breathe, which, thank God, now technology is reminding me to stand up. This is so funny. We've gotten to the point where I am being reminded to stand. I promised you some strange techniques I used during COVID. Some of these were because I was living by myself with a male housemate who I didn't know well for the first 6 months of the pandemic. I didn't feel like hugging him. It didn't feel comfortable. So I became a real live tree hugger. I would go find trees and hug the hell out of them. And I would stand in the sun. I'd take off my shoes. I'd put my feet on the ground. I'd feel the heartbeat of the earth. reconnecting to the fact that we are a part of a circle of life, getting away from the screen, standing out there under a big sky, looking at a flower, watching the bees, talking to a neighbor, touching their dog, you know, these are funny things, but maybe a little less funny is if you have a bathtub or a shower, feeling the warm water, giving yourself a foot massage at the end of the day. These self-care tactics we can and kind of need to do, especially if we're isolated, so that we continue to get that Maslow's hierarchy of essential needs met, even when we're restricted with this confinement policy. So be creative. I want to emphasize that, and everything each of you have shared of reconnecting with the body and mind connection. Yes.
And I loved at the very beginning of this, I've got two daughters, 9 and 11. So they were also sitting next to me doing virtual school, and, you know, they were going through it also. And I loved every couple of hours, you know, their teacher would just turn on the music and they just had to stand up and dance. And it was, you know, they found it to be a little bit strange, but after maybe the second week, it was like the best part of their day. They just got to stand up, do something. It was distracting. They'd shake, they'd dance, the music would go off 30 seconds and they felt like a new person. And I started doing it. I do it myself. I don't do it in front of the camera. I won't do it now, but, you know, you catch me in between a meeting, I might turn the music on and I might do a little dance, because it sort of just reshifts the brain a little bit and it gets your body up. And so I don't know, I took that one from my my 4th and 6th grade daughters.
I'd like to also acknowledge the fact that I know that we've kind of talked about people having mental health challenges related to remote learning and remote work schedules, but there are also some people who've absolutely flourished during this time because they haven't maybe felt comfortable with those social interactions. So this has been a dream for them. And so the idea of returning to work for some people will actually create more anxiety because they're perfectly fine with remaining in a remote work setting. So I think we have to acknowledge that and keep that in mind as we're thinking about this transition back to work.
Karen, that's a fantastic point. I actually felt some of that myself, and I'm a really big extrovert, but as I mentioned, I went through a really hard time before 2020, and coming back to LA from France, I was afforded the opportunity of quiet time with myself to heal and not deal with as much FOMO as we do in our regular life, right? Suddenly everyone had the permission slip to drink their tea by themselves in the afternoon, or read that book, or not have plans on the weekend and actually rest. So I love your highlighting that piece and acknowledging a different side of this challenging time, which was an opportunity and a gift. In fact, I'd like to ask, in terms of the threshold, moving from COVID into this next phase, is there something you want to keep with you from what you've learned of this period of time of sort of forced time with self? What ceremoniously do we want to bring with us as we go forward? Any learnings, yes, mental health wise, or perhaps otherwise?
I'm definitely going to keep my get outside and exercise every morning. I've kept it up so far, and my goal, I don't know if I'll do running every other day, but I'm definitely keeping that up because it has helped me physically and mentally. I just was going to say on this thread of what happens next, and to piggyback off of what Dr. Wilson just said, to me, the best way I can support my peers and my team is to just go at each conversation not necessarily knowing where they are, because I think it can be completely even day to day, but person to person. Some people are super excited to get the heck out of their house and cannot wait to get back to the office. Some people are, like Dr. Wilson just mentioned, some people are so happy to be at home, don't want all that pressure of being in the office. And you just kind of don't know where anyone is going to be. And so we just can't assume that everyone's raring to get back or not wanting to get back, and just approaching every conversation with curiosity and care and kindness is what I'm going to be trying to do in the next few months.
Yeah, plus one on on keeping kindness going and empathy and seeing, sort of thinking about the world through someone else's eyes and knowing that someone's going through something and not knowing, to Sherri's point, which side of the coin maybe someone's thinking. But I just think it's important that if we continue to carry that mindset through, we'll figure this out as we go. I mean, for me, the personal benefit is like I get to have, meals with my family. I haven't done that ever. Like I travel so much, and now I get to stay home and have. That's incredible. That's as good as it gets. As good as it gets on a personal level. So I would probably miss. I probably miss that. I also think there's something powerful about the setting here. Like we talk about this at work, in the old ways, you had some people in a room, you had some people on a screen, and that creates that interesting dynamic. I think when we're all a equal sized box on a screen, there's something powerful in that, and it creates a little more quality across the board. And so it'll be interesting to see how that sort of evolves as some people end up in the office and some people end up not.
Thank you. Thanks to each of you for adding and fleshing that out. We have a couple other questions from the panelists that I think would help us bring in other angles as well. So one was about language for normalizing the conversation around mental health. Maybe Karen, do you have anything that you would want to add about that from your experience, or real life experience, Sherri, Dave, of what you've seen work if you're around the board table or in a C-level Zoom? What works? I'm exhausted today. I feel like hell. God, I'm so depressed. I'm really worried about my, how do we talk about this? How do we normalize this?
I think, again, you normalize it by having just those general conversations, and just like you're communicating right now, saying, this has been a weird year. This has been really stressful. And I don't know about you, but it's been really hard. And hard can mean different things to different people, but oftentimes just saying that and acknowledging that you are also feeling the weight of this past year is a relief to someone else to also express how it is that they've been feeling. And also the uncertainty about not knowing how we're going to move forward and what that's going to look like. And that oftentimes can, again, alleviate the stress someone else might be holding and give them permission to share their experience as well.
I just read somewhere this tip of when you start a conversation and instead of saying, how are you, saying, how are you today? That might actually saying, like, just in this moment, Rose, right now, how are you feeling? That I might actually open up a deeper conversation. So
I love that, especially because it could help us unhook from identifying with our feelings, which I know when I've been in a hard place, I don't feel very proud to say, oh, how am I doing? I'm not doing well. I am not doing well. That's me? No. But how am I doing today? I don't feel so great today. That is different. So I really like that. Dave.
Yeah, I often think about something I learned from Active Minds, and Dr. Wilson, you said validate before. And so Active Minds has a pretty simple framework. It's VAR, VAR, and the V stands for validate. When somebody does open up and tell you something, you validate that, what they're feeling is okay. And the A stands for appreciate, and it's about appreciating that somebody had the courage to speak up. And the R is refer, and to let that person know that there are options, there is help, there are different things you can do to get help. And so I often think about that in the sort of in the context of your question.
Fantastic. And each of you are your parents. And Dr. Wilson, you work with adolescents, and I'd be curious to hear, what do you notice about the effects on children when adults, parents are feeling stressed at work? This has been a very tribal experience in that way this last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I would say is that parental stress levels and the stress levels of their children are absolutely linked. And there's actually been research that shows that when parents report high levels of stress, the cortisol levels in their children, which is a marker of stress, are heightened. So their kids have heightened markers of stress, even though they may not be verbalizing that that's the stress that they're experiencing. So there is this kind of trickle down experience where the stress that you're experiencing impacts the stress levels of your children. And stress at high levels, particularly if it goes on for extended periods of time, impact not only your mood, but your ability to think, your ability to organize, your ability to focus and pay attention, to remember information, which absolutely has an impact on kids in school and adults in the workplace. And so I think that one of the best things that parents can do is to manage their own stress in all of the ways that we talked about and Sherri and David shared and that I shared, because once you practice that self-care and those techniques that reduce your stress level, you're actually giving that gift to your children by reducing their stress levels as well. And all of the things that we've talked about in terms of validating the experiences of our coworkers and our employees, obviously that is true for our children as well. You know, when we were sending our kids back to school for hybrid learning, you know, we were talking to them about how do you feel about going back? And, you know, I'd be nervous too if I were going to go back to school and I haven't seen my teacher and my friends for a year. And now I'm wearing this silly mask. And so you're normalizing what it is that they're experiencing. And then you can't touch your friends. You have to stay far away. That must feel weird. And so I think that also by validating their experiences, you're also helping them decrease their stress levels as well.
I was just going to add, like, yes, when I'm stressed, I see it in my kids. Like what you just said is so spot on, and it you know, breaks my heart when I get anxious and I get stressed, and it goes right over to them. And I think this is tough. Like, I used to be able to you know, de-stress a little bit, I guess, on the subway ride, even though it doesn't make sense. I used to be able to de-stress on the subway ride home. And now that's not there. My ride home is out one bedroom door and into the kitchen, and that's where they see my stress or they hear it from their room. So it is tough. It's something that I'm super mindful of. I try my hardest, but it's not easy by any stretch.
You just reminded me, Dave, that you know, some people, I've read a couple articles, people doing like fake commutes during this period of time, because it's true that period of time, the transition time between when you're in the office and when you come home, it's the time when you're like, oh, I got to remember to do that, and oh, I got to let go of that, and you process so much stuff and you don't have that time anymore. So I actually also, because I've been going out every morning, I love the idea of the fake commute, because it does reset your mindset. I'll just say I've got 2 teenage boys. So anyone who knows teenage boys, around their parents, we don't get a lot of information. There's not a lot. There's a lot of, yeah, yep, no, yep, that's all. That's like how most of the conversations go. So I do think it's taken a toll on them. I mean, teenagers, the most important thing for teenagers often is their connections with their friends, and the way that those were limited, I think, was really hard on both of my kids. And just like with my team, I was really honest with my family about seeing a therapist, and I think that they've, you know, taken that to heart as well. So I think we can be good examples for our kids too.
Sherri, Dave, Karen, we're 1 minute away from wrapping this up, and I just want to thank each of you so much for your stories, your tips, your learnings, your perspective. And I want to highlight a few of these key words here, namely starting with transition. We're in a huge transition. I know transitions are constant, but creating that space for ourselves as we move into, and I want to address one last question here in my wrap up. What about the people who are actually appreciating working from home and are nervous about going back? They've found positive ways of keeping themselves healthier because they've had this space. And I want to point people to this HBR article that Tim Davis shared with me, in fact, about looking at the ways we operate in a hybrid manner based on the needs of our team members and ourselves. So there's considering time and physical environment. And there's basically a Punnett square, like 4 quadrants that you can look at, of flexible time, flexible space, fixed space, flexible time, you need to take a look for yourself and perhaps come up with a value proposition to have a conversation with someone at work to say, hey, here's how I can be the most effective in my work. I've taken this upon myself. What can we do together? And have basically a negotiation conversation for the benefit of all parties. So really want to, and if you need help with negotiation work, check out the diamond model. I was just learning about that today. That can be really helpful. So transition well, bring in that mindfulness, find what works for you. Absolutely, I would say 3 things to walk away with from here that I know I am from each of you is it's okay not to be okay. We are not alone. And there are resources. There is help, there is hope. And we're finding these answers together, and sharing our stories expedites and connects the dendrites between each of us as individuals on this planet. So let's keep our hearts and our minds open, keep that kindness alive, and let's make a beautiful transition over to the new future of work. And I was going to say to Tim, thank you everyone for listening and for your questions.
Yes, thank you, Rose, for moderating this amazing conversation. I really appreciate Karen, Dr. Wilson, and Sherri and Dave, how you guys just, you showed up as you, and not, not faking it, and talking about your kids and talking about your own challenges as you navigate this time. And I think that's just so valuable for our community to get to see that. And I'm hoping, because we've recorded this, we'll be able to share this with your communities as well, if you'd like. So I just really want to thank you on behalf of NAMI West Side for showing up today. And I am going to share a couple of links before we lose our audience. I just put some links in the chat box to some of the resources, the free resources that NAMI West Side offers. By the way, Dave, we love Active Minds. And really also, we're trying to partner with them on some future projects, but hope you'll also let them know about the free resources that we offer. And I put in the chat box, we have free weekly support groups for peers, people who identify as with mental health conditions, for family members. That's actually how I first became involved with NAMI, is going to a family support group when I had a son who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Just incredible resources. We also have a few more events coming up during this Mental Health Awareness Month, so you can click the link that says Wellness Weekend. We thought we were just going to program a weekend worth of events, and somehow it's bled out into the whole month. But really glad you all were able to be here for Mental Health Action Day. I also tried to put I put a link in the chat box, and Dave, I thought you might appreciate this, to a 1-minute meditation. Because I was one of those people who just, my mind was always going, and I could never imagine that I had enough time carved out to actually do a meditation. And then someone shared this 1-minute meditation. I was like, yeah, I can do that. So I loved all the tips you shared, and I just thought I would share that one last little tool. So thank you all for coming. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. Rose, thank you again for the wonderful moderation, and we'll see you all down the road in whatever lies ahead for all of us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.